What if the most brilliant art heist in history wasn't about stealing a painting, but erasing its existence entirely? Just 3 weeks ago, the art world was shaken to its core when authorities uncovered a $40 million masterpiece had been swapped for a forgery so flawless it fooled top experts for over 2 years. But here's the part that changes everything. This wasn't just theft, it was a calculated disappearance. The painting wasn't just stolen, it was deleted from history. This isn't your typical smash and grab robbery. This is the story of how a group of criminals pulled off what investigators are calling the most psychologically sophisticated art theft ever attempted. They didn't just take a painting and run, they created an entire alternate reality where their crime was invisible, and today I'm going to break down exactly how they did it, step by step. The masterpiece at the center of this incredible heist was called The Eternal Moment by renowned artist Vincent Marlowe. This painting, completed in 1987, was considered one of the most significant works of contemporary art. It depicted a surreal landscape where time seemed to fold in on itself, with clocks melting into flower petals and human figures frozen mid-motion against a backdrop of shifting geometric patterns. The piece was valued at exactly $42 million and was the crown jewel of the prestigious Whitmore Gallery in downtown Manhattan. But before we dive into how this masterpiece vanished without a trace, let me paint you a picture of just how secure this gallery was supposed to be. The Whitmore Gallery wasn't just any art museum. This place had security measures that would make Fort Knox jealous. We're talking about infrared motion sensors, pressure-sensitive floors, temperature-controlled chambers, and a security system that required 3 different key cards and biometric scans just to access the main exhibition hall. The painting itself was displayed in what they called the Vault Room, a climate-controlled space with bulletproof glass, electromagnetic locks, and cameras that recorded every angle 24 hours a day. The insurance company had specifically required that no fewer than 2 guards be present in the vault room at all times, and the painting was checked and verified by experts every single week. So, how do you steal something that's basically impossible to steal? Well, our criminals had a different approach entirely. Instead of fighting the security system, they decided to become part of it. The mastermind behind this operation was a woman named Sarah Chen, though that probably wasn't her real name. Chen had spent 15 years working as a legitimate art restoration specialist, building an impeccable reputation in the industry. She had restored works for major museums, private collectors, and even government institutions. Her credentials were spotless, her references were glowing, and her expertise was undeniable. Here's where the genius begins to unfold. Chen didn't apply for a job at the Whitmore Gallery. Instead, she created a situation where they would desperately need her services. Through a series of carefully orchestrated events, she managed to introduce microscopic environmental factors that would slowly begin to affect certain paintings in the gallery's collection. It started with subtle changes, a slight discoloration in one corner of a lesser painting, some minor cracking in the varnish of another piece. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would trigger alarms, but enough to make the gallery's insurance company nervous. When these issues were discovered during routine inspections, the gallery found themselves in need of an emergency restoration consultant. And who should appear with perfect timing and impeccable credentials? Sarah Chen, of course. She was hired not just as a consultant, but as a temporary in-house restoration expert while the gallery dealt with what appeared to be a minor climate control malfunction affecting their collection. This gave Chen legitimate, unrestricted access to the gallery's most secure areas. She had her own key cards, her own access codes, and most importantly, she had the trust of the entire staff. But Chen wasn't working alone. She had assembled a team of specialists that read like a Hollywood heist movie cast. Her partner in crime was Marcus Webb, a former museum security consultant who knew every vulnerability in high-end gallery security systems. Webb had spent a decade helping museums improve their security, which meant he knew exactly how to circumvent those same systems. He joined Chen's operation by getting himself hired as a temporary security advisor for the gallery, ostensibly to help them upgrade their systems in light of the mysterious environmental issues affecting their collection. The third member of their team was perhaps the most crucial, Elena Rodriguez, a master forger whose skills were so advanced that her copies had fooled authentication experts for years. Rodriguez had been creating perfect replicas of famous artworks for legitimate purposes, helping museums create traveling exhibition pieces and insurance documentation. But for this job, she would be creating something far more complex than a simple forgery. The beauty of their plan was its patience. Chen and Webb spent months establishing themselves as trusted employees of the gallery. They learned every routine, every security protocol, every staff schedule. They studied the patterns of the guards, the timing of the security checks, and most importantly, they mapped every single blind spot in the gallery's surveillance system. But here's where their plan gets truly diabolical. They weren't just planning to steal the eternal moment and replace it with a forgery. They were planning to make everyone believe that their forgery was the original painting, and that the original painting they were stealing was actually the fake. Rodriguez spent 8 months creating not one, but 2 perfect copies of the eternal moment. The first copy was made using modern materials and techniques, designed to pass casual inspection but fail under serious scrutiny. The second copy was a masterpiece of deception, created using materials and techniques that perfectly matched the original 1987 painting. The psychological manipulation began subtly. Chen would make casual comments about certain irregularities she noticed in the eternal moment during her restoration work. She mentioned concerns about the paint aging patterns, subtle inconsistencies in the brushwork, and minor details that didn't quite match the artist's documented techniques from that period. These concerns were carefully crafted to plant seeds of doubt without triggering a full authentication review. Chen was building a narrative that would later support their ultimate deception. Meanwhile, Webb was documenting security vulnerabilities and creating detailed plans for the actual theft. The switch itself was planned for a weekend when the gallery would be closed for a routine maintenance update to their climate control systems. This provided the perfect cover for the team to be in the building legitimately while having minimal supervision. On the night of the heist, everything went according to plan. Webb had created a 20-minute window where the security cameras in the vault room would loop previous footage, making it appear that nothing was happening while the team made their move. Chen and Rodriguez entered the vault room with legitimate access codes and began the swap. But instead of simply replacing the original with a forgery, they implemented the final phase of their psychological manipulation. They replaced the original, the eternal moment, with Rodriguez's deliberately imperfect first copy, the one designed to eventually fail authentication tests. Then they carefully placed the original painting in a specially prepared storage container that would be smuggled out of the gallery during the next day's routine equipment maintenance. The genius of this approach was that they weren't trying to hide the fact that a switch had been made. They were controlling how that switch would be discovered and interpreted. Over the following weeks, Chen continued to express concerns about the painting's authenticity, gradually building a case that would lead to a formal authentication review. When that review finally happened, Rodriguez's deliberately flawed forgery was discovered exactly as planned. The gallery was shocked to learn that their prized masterpiece was apparently a fake, but here's where the psychological manipulation reached its peak. Chen presented her theory that the original painting had been replaced years earlier, possibly during a previous restoration or loan to another institution. She had carefully constructed a paper trail suggesting that the switch could have happened during any number of legitimate transfers over the painting's history. The gallery's insurance company launched a massive investigation, but they were looking for a conventional art theft that had never actually occurred. They were trying to figure out when someone had stolen the original painting and replaced it with a fake, not realizing that the original painting was sitting in a storage facility just 40 miles away. Meanwhile, Rodriguez's second forgery, the perfect copy made with period-appropriate materials, was secretly introduced into the art market through a complex network of private dealers and auction houses. The documentation suggested that this painting was the eternal moment, recovered from a private collection where it had been stored for decades. The psychological manipulation was so complete that when experts compared the recovered painting to the one in the gallery, they immediately identified Rodriguez's perfect forgery as the authentic piece and confirmed that the gallery had been displaying a fake for years. The gallery was forced to acknowledge that they had been deceived, and they actually purchased Rodriguez's perfect forgery to replace the one they now believed was fake. They essentially paid the criminals to steal their own painting. But the story doesn't end there. The investigation into this remarkable heist revealed layers of deception that investigators are still unraveling today. Chen, Webb, and Rodriguez had created such an elaborate web of misdirection that even after their scheme was discovered, authorities struggled to piece together exactly what had happened. The breakthrough came when a former gallery employee noticed inconsistencies in the maintenance logs from the weekend of the heist. This led to a deeper investigation of the staff who had been working at the gallery during the relevant time period. When investigators began looking into Sarah Chen's background, they discovered that her perfect credentials were themselves an elaborate forgery. The real Sarah Chen had died in a car accident 5 years earlier, and the woman who had been working at the gallery had assumed her identity so completely that she had even fooled background check companies. This revelation opened up an entirely new line of investigation that eventually led to the discovery of the original painting. The psychological sophistication of this heist has forced law enforcement agencies to completely rethink their approach to art theft prevention. The criminals didn't just steal a painting, they manipulated the entire system of authentication and verification that the art world depends on. What makes this case particularly fascinating is how it exploited the human tendency to trust authority and expertise. Everyone involved in the gallery's operation was fooled not by clever technology or sophisticated tools, but by carefully crafted psychological manipulation that made them question their own perceptions. The investigation revealed that the team had been planning this heist for over 3 years, gradually building their false identities and establishing their reputations in the art world. They had created an entire alternate reality where their criminal plan appeared to be legitimate professional work. The final twist in this incredible story is that the criminals were ultimately caught not by sophisticated police work or advanced forensic techniques, but by their own success. Their plan was so perfect that it created inconsistencies that were actually more suspicious than a straightforward theft would have been. When the original painting was finally recovered, it was found exactly where the investigation suggested it should be, in a storage facility that had been rented under one of the fake identities the criminals had created. The facility's security footage showed Chen and Webb storing the painting with the same careful attention to detail they had shown throughout their operation. This case has become a landmark study in criminal psychology and security planning. It demonstrates how the most effective crimes aren't necessarily the most technologically sophisticated, but rather the ones that best understand and manipulate human psychology. The art world has been forced to implement entirely new authentication protocols and security measures in response to this heist. Galleries now require multiple independent verification of any restoration work, and insurance companies have developed new policies specifically designed to prevent this type of psychological manipulation. The story of the Eternal Moment heist reminds us that the most dangerous criminals aren't always the ones with the biggest guns or the most advanced technology. Sometimes the most dangerous criminals are the ones who understand that the greatest security vulnerability in any system is the human element. What makes this case truly remarkable is that it succeeded not despite the gallery's security measures, but because of them. The criminals turned the gallery's own security protocols into tools for their deception, proving that sometimes the best way to commit the perfect crime is to make everyone believe that no crime has been committed at all.